Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my thoughts on Resident Evil Village. Today, we are tackling responses to reviewers. Oh, this is gonna be painful.
I clocked in at 9.5 hours on my first playthrough, taking my time. I've heard some people have shorter times, but I've had a couple of friends come closer to like 11 hours. Now, to some, that might sound like an outrage, but if you've played Resident Evil games, you know this is par for the course. These emphasize mastery and replayability.
This game suffers from subsequent playthroughs, as I said before.
Post-game stuff is similar to 7. Accomplishments throughout your playthrough are tallied, and then you can spend points on concept art, character models, or weapons and help for your next playthrough. I like this. It's satisfying.
Resident Evil 8's post-game is not similar to 7's, sir. In 7, if you beat the game on Madhouse, you unlock infinite ammo. And from then on, every time you beat it, you unlock something else until you get everything. In Resident Evil 8, to unlock that stuff, you need to complete challenges in the game, or in Mercenaries. Buy them in the bonus shop, and then you can use them.
But of course, this is a before you buy. You know how this goes down by now. I give you some pros, some cons, what the game is, and of course, a lot of personal opinion. So now I want to hear yours.
No, I don't think you do want to hear my personal opinions about this game.
Alone and left for dead, Ethan embarks on a mission to find answers and rescue his daughter. The specifics are too juicy to get into.
Well, thank God the details aren't too juicy for me. It makes me curious why you gloss over those details, though.
Meanwhile, the castle is guarded by none other than Lady Dimitrescu and her 3 daughters, making thorough exploration much less manageable as they frequently hunt you down.
Oh, so you're the one I was thinking about when I talked about the daughters. Them frequently hunting you down was not my experience. I knew exactly when those 3 would spawn in. Only one of them will be a detriment to you, and that's only if you continuously move through that room with the staircase. And it's also pretty easy to make them go away. If you throw on the mod that takes the flies away, you can see what's actually going on.
Still not as capable as protagonists like Leon Kennedy or Jill Valentine. Blocking incoming attacks is critical for survival, and if timed correctly, you can follow up with the shove to gain some distance.
Yeah, you block with a half-bitten off hand. Don't talk to me about blocking with your arms. I know it's a mechanic, but it's stupid when you stop to think about it.
When a giant hammer or axe or mace is coming to me and I put my arms in the way, I'm not expecting to do well, if you will.
Yeah, I'm fine with the mechanic existing of if you're gonna get hit, you can, instead of trying an all or nothing to evade the attack, you just accept a little bit of damage, but you do take the damage. I'm fine with that as a mechanic. It just seems really unintuitive when you block with your hands and you're getting hit by axes and scythes and swords and stuff. It just doesn't, that doesn't seem like it'd work to me.
I love the idea that he's like, if you see fire, you run away, but if it's an axe, you put your arms up. It's like, fucking no, I'm running away from the axe too.
Yeah. Like me, like an axe hitting my arm, that's a fail state, and I'm gonna
That
avoid
is a
that
fail
at all costs.
Wow, you broke
Right?
Fringy, holy shit.
And this is like, and if
He's just done.
like I'm actually
instead of running away. What? Like running away is the suboptimal choice.
if you are running,
choice is losing your fucking hands.
Large open spaces provide plenty of opportunities to stay mobile when you're overwhelmed. You can hunker down to defend a location by barricading doors, shooting bags of flour to disorient enemies.
Tell me, sir, exactly how many times did you use those bags of flour? Because I completely ignored them and I was fine. Also, who's leaving giant bags of flour everywhere? Why are they everywhere?
Duke, why are you here?
Where there's coin to be made.
Arguably the most important character in the village is the Duke. The enigmatic merchant has a habit of showing up exactly when you need him, offering moments of cozy respite and intriguing banter.
Yeah, but how does the Duke show up everywhere? Did you ever stop to ask that? How is the Duke in a part of Dimitrescu's castle and she's completely fine with it and won't go in that room and interrupt him? Sure, it's nice to have a merchant nearby, but it makes zero sense narratively.
encouraging you to always be aware of your surroundings.
So that bit with Lady Dimitrescu swinging like that is where I have a problem with her fucking AI. Why would you swing your claws in a place that is nowhere near me? Who are you stabbing over there? Huh? What did that chair ever do to you?
Resident Evil Village's imposing environments lay the groundwork for exhilarating action and slow creeping fear. Exploration and resource management are among the best of the series. A few story elements miss the mark, and Mercenaries is over too quickly, but Village is another remarkable entry in the long-running survival horror series.
If its story misses the mark, how is it a remarkable entry?
Resident Evil 4 was a seminal entry into the Resident Evil franchise for a variety of reasons, but certainly one of those reasons was that it ditched the kind of self-serious, true horror tone. It became far more about this schlocky ghost train style of horror that was completely over the top and ridiculous and fun. It was fun horror, where the preceding entries were trying to be like scary horror.
If it's not scary, then stop calling it horror.
But then we get to Resident Evil 7, which was the first game to be in first-person perspective, and it brought an entirely new tone to the franchise. It wasn't just serious, scary horror, it was this grotesque, personal horror, like your wife chopping off your hand horror, like you're trapped in an escape room while Discount Jigsaw gleefully counts down the moment to your incineration horror, like being fed maggot soup until you die horror.
So, you're using a lot of words to say Resident Evil 7 had multiple genres of horror within itself. I just took what you said and made it smaller and easier to understand. Clear and concise.
But its weak cast of characters, laughable plot lines, and disappointing boss encounters took me out of the experience, robbing me of the X factor that Resident Evil games live and die by. Resident Evil Village is a good game. I just didn't like it very much.
Everything that you just said, I agree with. I'm struggling to understand why you're still calling it a good game.
Ethan has to overcome the Lords of the Realm to save his daughter, while also uncovering the inevitable link back to the Umbrella Corporation and the T-Virus that each game serves up, rewriting history further and further back with each new iteration.
Stop. Just on this alone, I get the impression that you didn't stop to read. You just saw the Umbrella stuff and said, Umbrella is behind this, it's all coming together.
But beyond the memes lay a genuine interest in a character that was really compelling. She was so unique, so classy, so terrifying, so thick. We'd never seen a villain like this before, and she really supercharged the narrative surrounding this game, not just because of the sex stuff, but because she seemed actually interesting.
Okay, name one interesting thing that you know about Lady Dimitrescu. Tall is not one of them.
I think the marketing of this game has definitely led to some incorrect expectations about the centrality of the big woman. And that's not a spoiler, by the way. I think it's just the honest resetting of expectations that Capcom has been unwilling to do at this point. Lady Dimitrescu is an important figure in the game, but she's just one of the figures, and the other figures you'll square off against are nowhere near as interesting or compelling or watchable as Lady Dimitrescu.
And you don't do it. Cool. I disagree with you, by the way. I find Heisenberg far more interesting because there's something there that I'm interested in. And unlike you, I'll explain myself. I was interested because I wanted to know more about how he was forced into Miranda's family, and how he was planning on helping us in saving Rose and killing Miranda. Because the first time he tells us, he doesn't say anything about using Rose as a weapon. So I'm all for it. There was something there.
None of this compares to how much I hate the protagonist, Ethan Winters. I hate him so much. I don't think I've ever hated a video game protagonist more than this guy. Ethan feels like what you'd get if you removed all of the active verbs from a person's biography. There's a reason we never see his face, because if we did, he'd have this like 1,000-yard stare where you can see in his eyes that the lights are on, but nobody is home. He is completely incapable of grappling with even the basics of the situation he finds himself in, constantly wondering aloud, what's going on? As the player controlling him knows exactly what the fuck is going on. You've heard of input delay when controlling a character? Well, Ethan is the first video game character to embody the concept of narrative input delay, where the player is feeding Ethan a constant stream of information, but Ethan's amoeba brain is in a constant state of buffering. More than anything else though, Ethan is just this massive charisma vacuum. He has no presence, no agency, no personality, nothing. He is this wet mop of a character that slops awkwardly from scene to scene, and his biggest moments of character development are when enemies cut off a new part of his anatomy. And by the way, yes, I know that Ethan was the protagonist in the last game, but like the rest of the game was so strong that it didn't matter that Ethan completely sucked, okay? And there are other characters to carry that story forward. With the absence of those characters here, you're just like focused on Ethan and how much he sucks.
Yes, I agree with you on Ethan.
Here, Chris is magnetic, his every utterance imbued with the leading man badassery that Hollywood was built on. Where Ethan is this flaccid beta, Chris Redfield is this barking alpha dog, to the point where Ethan has Chris saved as alpha in his phone. See, even Ethan knows his place. Sadly, Chris is criminally underutilized throughout the majority of this game. He does have his moments in the sun, but they feel too few and far between and too brief. When he's there, we're like glued to our screen, hanging off his every word, but as he turns his back, we're like, no, don't go, don't leave me with Ethan.
Sir, they made Chris a fucking idiot in this game.
Village does not lack for ambition. This game is anything but lazy.
Bruh.
Capcom really swung for the fences on this, and I think it gets a lot of it right, and that's why I have no problem saying that this is good, and I recommend it.
And I have every problem with calling Resident Evil 8 a good game. There's too much wrong with it for me to call it a good game. So far we've had 3 people, and the only part they've been talking about at length was the castle. Why? I'm assuming it's because of the review embargo, and thank God I'm not bound by any of that. But I'm starting to notice a pattern here. It's not word for word, but they're all talking about the same general points. It's almost like Capcom sent them an early review copy and an email with specific talking points. I know, I can't prove any of that tinfoil hat thing. I'm just having Outlast review flashbacks. And I know, spoilers and shit, but only the castle? Really? And I'll point this out again. So far, I've heard everyone say this horror game wasn't scary. So maybe stop calling it a horror game.
Weird question. How often would you say foreign objects get traumatically inserted into your body during an average week? Maybe once at most, and usually with your consent? Well, tell that to Ethan Winters, or as I've come to call him, the amazing human desk tidy. It's seriously tarnishing his average every man in a crisis image, the sheer amount of random sharp objects he gets stuck in him in the course of Resident Evil 7 and 8. By the end, it's just gotten silly. I know he doesn't ask for any of it, but you know what they say, if everyone you meet is an impalement weirdo, maybe the impalement weirdo is you. At the start of Resident Evil Village, Ethan, unluckiest chump in the Western Hemisphere Winters, is lounging around the house with his wife and baby, thinking he's getting impaled on things days are behind him, when of all people, Chris Redfield bursts in, shoots Mrs. Winters dead, and kidnaps the baby. This, boys and girls, is what we call a hook. But don't worry, it's like what they used to do with superhero comics, where the cover shows Superman about to drop kick a baby into a volcano or something, to force you to buy the comic and discover, oh, turns out all along it was a volcano-shaped sweet shop and it's the baby's birthday. So obviously there's an explanation for Chris's actions, one that I feel he could have summarized to Ethan easily enough before or during the home invasion, without having to beat him unconscious with a rifle butt. Chris just felt like being a real dick about it for some reason. Maybe he couldn't find a boulder to punch that morning. Anyway, the only difference is the acreage over which it all takes place. And from Resident Evil 4, we take the gothic B-movie vibe, inventory system, quirky merchant character and associated weapon upgrade mechanics, and basically the whole setting. Isolated village in open quotes Europe. Europe, eh? So somewhere between Manchester and Istanbul, then. Hey, we should probably do something to seem like we're not just entirely copying RE4's homework. What's the exact opposite of a tiny castle-owning man? A giant castle-owning woman. Genius. Fish fingers all round. But I was hoping for more. Yahtzee, Resident Evil 4 and 7 were your 2 highlights of the series. Surely a game that combines them must be everything you'd want, right? Wrong, dirty boy, no mummy milkies for you. First of all, it's hard to appreciate the creativity on display when so many of its moments and mechanics are copied beat for beat from its 2 main influences. But more importantly, 4 and 7 were good for different reasons. 4 was amusingly camp and action-focused and grand in scope, but 7 was survival-focused and benefited from a narrowing of scope that made it effectively unnerving. 8, as a result, is a severely mixed bag. How mixed? Put it like this. There is a moment moment in Village that was the most genuinely terrifying horror experience I've had in a video game for a very long time. There is another moment sometime later where you're in a dreary, repetitive industrial environment fighting cyborgs, and it's about as scary and exciting as trying to squeeze past a Borg cosplayer on a narrow staircase. And when I say moment, I mean about an hour. This is part of the decline the game suffers after Mommy Milkies has spooged herself out of the game, and after the really effective horror part. It's the bit in the dollhouse, alright? I presume it's okay for a review to identify the bit it's praising. I don't know, you people cry spoilers if I so much as tell you Ethan Winter's inside leg measurement. It's like Resident Evil is a restaurant that's been trying to sell octopus burgers, and no one fucking likes the octopus burgers because they're slimy and weird, and the eyeballs look like they're judging me. So then they bring out a nice burger with no octopus, and it sells really well, and the managers all go, great, now how do we work the octopus back into this? Forget about the fucking octopus! The octopus doesn't work! Why do you always insist on pushing the octopus? Are you trying to launder a marine life smuggling enterprise?
Thank you, Yahtzee. And while I love this review, I unfortunately have to say I think you're wrong with the dollhouse being the high point for the reasons I discussed in its section. I think the high point was the factory.
Ink ribbon. Resident Evil Village, or Resident Evil 8, is the newest entry in my most beloved game franchise. That means that this review isn't just a review of the game, but a review from the perspective of a diehard Resident Evil fan.
Alright, diehard Resident Evil fan, let's see what you bring to the table.
There is one really big issue I have with the combat, and I thought it was just me, but a lot of other players have also mentioned, and that issue is the aiming. For some reason, the aiming just feels very, very wobbly. It's almost like the gun takes half a second to get into the position that you want, which makes you miss your target a lot, especially if you're going for headshots. This, combined with enemies constantly dodging and weaving, can cause a bit of frustration when you end up missing 10 shots in a row.
Here's a suggestion with the aiming. Experiment with the auto-aim. I can see you're playing on the PS5 like every fucking body else. All I can say is I played on the PC, and I didn't have an issue with aiming.
Another thing I feel that's worth mentioning is the haptic feedback of the PS5 controller because it affected the experience quite a bit, mainly with pulling the trigger to fire. Depending on which weapon you use, the trigger gives a different amount of resistance. So while firing the handgun wasn't too bad, weapons like the shotgun and sniper rifle require you to really pull the trigger hard, to the point that my fingers started to become fatigued, which is exactly what would happen if I was firing real weapons that much. While it did sometimes feel like I was almost fighting the controller, it was kind of a cool experience. There's also little things like rumbling and clicking that happen every time you switch weapons and items or open doors. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you ever get the chance to try it, you'll see what I mean. It's really cool.
Okay, then here's another suggestion. Maybe there's a connection between the feedback on the trigger and your aim. I seriously need someone to explain to me why Lady Dimitrescu is interesting. One descriptive reason why she's an interesting character. Being tall with Freddy Krueger hands is not interesting to me, so surely I'm missing something. I need to know what it is.
It's all over the place. I haven't even talked about the village itself, which is like sort of a Metroidvania type of thing. Every time you beat one of the four, the village layout changes and you have some item that can unlock some new houses. But the layout changes every time you go back to it, so there's less paths to travel around the village. And it's kind of a neat concept, but it's also kind of annoying.
I was agreeing with the majority of your review up to this point. What do you mean the village changes and there's less to explore? No, that's not what happens. Your access to the village stays the same, if not expands because of the iron key and the crank. It's the Lord's sections that get removed after you complete them.
And the same can be said for the story. Story doesn't really matter that much in a Resident Evil game, so I won't waste too much time on this.
Yeah, fuck off with that. If it doesn't matter and if it's not supposed to make sense, why the fuck are they trying to explain anything?
Chris, I think Chris says this to you, but also the thing next to Chris, the note next to Chris at that section, it also explains this. But if you're gonna, so like they want it to make sense. So the whole it's not supposed to make sense thing, it all falls apart because they're trying to have it make sense.
This idea that we're supposed to believe, like, no, Resident Evil stories, they're designed to be stupid. That's the whole point.
Then they shouldn't explain
Yeah,
everything if they don't want
How
to
do
make
you,
sense.
how do you have emotional, dramatic payoffs if nothing is supposed to make sense? Because
I
like,
like the idea that they sit around a writer's room like, this makes too much sense.
Yeah, we gotta
make
stop
make
this.
less
Yeah,
sense."
we gotta fuck this up.
Story always matters in games that have them.
Heart ripped out because it's not a real heart, I guess. It's just, again, mold that looks like a heart. I don't know, you ask way too many questions.
Too many questions? I say not enough. They're all valid fucking questions, man. Don't back down from this. Stand firm. Let them know it doesn't make any fucking sense. I bashed Red Barrels for it in Outlast 2. I bashed Ubisoft for it in Far Cry 5. Now bash fucking Capcom in it for Resident Evil 8. It's a Resident Evil game. It's not supposed to make sense. That's not a fucking argument.
Something that I actually hated was a retcon that apparently Oswell E. Spencer, the man who created Umbrella, was inspired by Mother Miranda, since Mother Miranda's immortal and she got her powers from the mold like 100 years ago. He was inspired by her to go look for like a virus that would ascend humanity, right? So what's the problem with this? Oh, one simple thing. As Spencer was dying of old age or whatever disease he had as well in RE5, why didn't he just think to go find Mother Miranda's village again and become immortal with the mold? And it's the same thing he said with the story. Story doesn't really matter that much in Resident Evil games, so I won't waste too much time on this. Because again, who cares about story in Resident Evil? As Spencer was dying of old age or whatever disease he had as well in RE5, why didn't he just think to go find Mother Miranda's village again and become immortal with the mold?
So to answer your question, you care. Even if you don't realize it. And you just discovered why we care about stories in games. Even in Resident Evil.
So in conclusion, what do I think about Resident Evil Village? Well, it's a good game. Honestly, it's even a great game.
No, I disagree. It's most assuredly not a great game. All of these reviewers say that a positive for this game is replayability. No. Replayability kills this game. The entire game relies on first playthrough spectacle. After you go through it again and again, it starts to crumble. Anyway, we have 2 more reviewers to look at, and this next one is going to be very lengthy. So, we will cut this video here and return with that next reviewer. Don't have her have a whole den's worth of lions. Lions? Are you fucking serious?